And we are live. My name's JP Berg, and this is Dumb the Wiser. As you can see today, we're joined with very special guest, Mr. Peter McIsaac, best-selling author, retired game warden, professional firefighter, truth teller, and the book is The Redneck Conservative: How Conservatives Are Made. How are you doing, sir?
Well, I definitely have my plate full, JP. I got to tell you, there's a lot of exciting for me, but not for so many other people going on in Canada and over in Davos today. So we got a lot to talk about.
That's for sure. So we'll start on the court case. You actually have a court case that's going presently. Why don't you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. So as I go through this, you feel to pop in at any time because once I get started on this, it's hard to stop me. Back in 2024 here in Nova Scotia, we had a set election date and for 2025. And Premier Tim Houston at the time decided to break the set legislation, call a snap election, knowing that there were charter violations in place that were keeping independent candidates off the ballot in Nova Scotia. As the president of the Independent Nova Scotia Initiative, myself and a couple other folks had started that program back in 2023 with the goal of having an independent run in all 55 ridings in Nova Scotia. And why independence? Because Brian Peckford had given me the idea in multiple conversations that if you ran an independent and had them sign a performance-based contract before going into office and made it a good, solid contract so that if they broke their word, lied, tried to cross the floor or do anything, for the first time in Canadian politics, you'd be able to fire a politician that had a firing coming, much like the folks who crossed the floor in Ottawa and basically traitors to the people who they voted for. So Tim Houston saw the rise of the independents in Nova Scotia, and as a result of that, rather than fix the outstanding charter violations that were keeping independents off the ballot, he decided to capitalize on those shortcomings and called a snap election and kept 19 of them off the ballot. Now, if we'd have gone 8 months out to the set election date, we probably would have had an independent in every riding. And the goal was not to win 55 seats. The goal was to win enough independents that you could control the legislature, control the legislature in a situation where you had a close government or a minority government, much like we have right now in Ottawa. I'll give you an example, JP. If we had 5 solid independents tied down with contracts right now in Ottawa, Canada wouldn't be in the mess it's in. Mm-hmm. They would have already toppled the government because you can lay out terms in a contract that say, there's no way that you can vote for a deficit budget.
So it's a really novel concept. I just want to ring it back to you to make sure I got it true. So it's not merely setting independents to run, but it's independents with a contractual arrangement which provides accountability for once to the people, to their constituency.
For the first time in Canadian political history.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
And that's why we have countries all around the world watching what's happening in this court case. So the court case number is PTH. If you want to type that in and put it up on the screen, it's PTH 538503. And that right now, it's a Supreme Court judicial review being held in Port Hawkesbury, Nova Scotia on Cape Breton Island. And we're back in court again on February 6th. And we have an overwhelmingly solid case against the government. We're up to 5 charter violations inside the Elections Act. And what's going to happen when we win this case, or we'll believe that we'll win the case, JP, is that it levels the playing field for independents all across Canada, both in provincial politics and federal politics. Because an independent without a contract, well, they're worse than people inside party politics. Mm-hmm. When I retired from natural resources in 2012, I ran for office. I was naive enough at the time to believe maybe I could fix things from inside government, but the system is broken so bad, you can't fix what we're working with right now. I mean, we look at our major parties in Canada, they're all wings of the same bird. Yep. And they're controlled by party whips. And so we came up with the initial idea, and Brian Peckford, as a former premier of Newfoundland and a lawyer, said, well, Pete, independents are the way to go, but you have to tie their hands with an ironclad contract that you put together between the constituents in the riding and them, and then you have to hold them 100% accountable. And you lay out the terms, and every different riding will have different terms. And people are going to have to get good at horse trading. But ultimately, when someone breaks their word, lies, cheats, steals, does any of the things that we watch on a routine basis here in Canada, fire them. Not only fire them, you can ban them from running in politics for the duration of the term. You can make them repay back any association that you set up with them. There's so many things that you can do to tie these guys' hands that your average person who wants to go into politics so that they can get a good pension, they're not going near this thing with a 10-foot pole. What we found, JP, is you actually have to work diligently to try to talk people into doing this. And then what happens is you end up getting the right people.
And that's right. I mean, anyone who's approaching public service should be apprehensive. They should know that they're going to be, well, we should normalize, and this system that you're saying does, it normalizes scrutiny from the electorate. They should feel that. It shouldn't be self-serving, measly-mouthed little career politicians that get in there, because that's the problem. And it's so like systemically corrupt, provincially, especially federally, that they're locked down. And we've, to the contrary of what I'm saying, it's like we've normalized these fake politicians with this feckless scripted rhetoric. And we watch the House of Commons, we'll watch question period, and we all know inherently at this point, like, this is just performative. It's nonsense. So, I mean, I think it's a great concept. I'm really looking forward to see how it plays out if we could set a precedence with it.
So right now, we hope to have final decisions on the case here this year, hopefully before September. And when we win, what will happen is we're going to create a lot of case law. And the case law will open the floodgates for people to be able to do this all across Canada. Most people don't know that. For example, up in the Northwest Territories, they don't have normal party system. They have all independents. Now, they have all independents, but that's not what our goal was, JP. Our goal was to get enough good independents tied down with contracts to be able to go in a party system on a level playing field, which doesn't exist right now. And they can table legislation, meaningful legislation that they've agreed with their constituents that needs to be tabled. And if they're not successful, well, you can't fire them for that, but they still have to table it and they have to do what they said they were going to do. Mm-hmm. And here's what happens is because people in power tend to be so power hungry that then you can put them in a position that they'll do things they don't want to do and pass legislation they don't want to pass in order to try to stay in power as long as they can. And the overall goal is to start unwinding some of the garbage that's been jammed down our throat by what's called a Fabianism style system of 1,000 fatal cuts, right? Mm-hmm. And all these little cuts are small enough that you don't notice them until they pile up. But independents can go in with a big pack of Band-Aids and start Band-Aiding up all these cuts, get all this stuff unwound, and strategically give power for the first time in Canada back to the voters. And so what's happening, we have countries all around the world watching. UK's watching, Australia's watching, New Zealand, anybody with a parliamentary system like we have. And this will also work, for example, south of our border. Can you imagine going down into the US and you have to sign a contract with your constituents that says, if you vote for some of this stuff, we'll fire you?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's only logical. I mean, yeah. any other job in the world, if you took the job under the pretense of accomplishing specific objectives, exactly. And then you get in the job and you not only do not get those objectives accomplished, you work to the contrary of them or the spirit of them, then you would be terminated. So it's funny that it's not like inbuilt into the system, and it just goes to show how systemically, and I use that word very carefully, it's systemically corrupted.
Well, if you look at it from a federal viewpoint, Mark Carney got voted in because he's the only person that he claimed that would be able to rein in Trump and do trade deals in the U.S. And he's been a categorically massive failure to the point that he just went and, he did a deal with the Communist Chinese Party, the same party that months ago he was saying were the number one security threat to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done an interview. Well, I did an interview with Gary Clement. And Gary's he was the former head of the RCMP Proceeds of Crime Division. And he just wrote a book with Michelle Chanu Katsuya. And he was the head of CSIS for Asia Pacific for a number of years before he retired. So I did an interview with both of those guys. They launched a new book about the amount of Chinese interference in PEI, for example. And I read an article from him this morning talking about how massively dangerous the move is that Mark Carney just made to invite the Chinese government to work hand in hand with our police services. People have no idea what a target that Carney just put on Canada's back. The United States categorically will not allow a country on their border that's internally manipulated and run by the Communist Chinese Party. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I agree. We're seeing some major things playing out geopolitically. Trump has taken the largest delegation ever to the WEF meetings in Davos. So what we're expecting, what we're hoping for, is scorched earth, is him to just give them their terms of surrender, essentially. And I wonder, when I watch Carney and when I watch that move specifically, and just the way it's playing out, when I frame it more broadly, it makes me wonder, like, do they even know what they're doing at this point, or are they just reacting? Did the playing field change so dramatically that they're in this perpetual state of just reacting to what Trump is doing?
I think that they're told what to do about 3 levels above what the average person sees.
Yes.
This is a huge chess game. Donald Trump is people don't know that Donald Trump is an expert chess player at the actual game. And most people and most commentators that I look at, they're not even good at checkers. And so it's difficult to do an analysis of somebody like Trump until you read a couple of his books. So I've read 2 of his books now, and it gives me a little bit better understanding of how the man thinks. You know, most people haven't read The Art of the Deal. Most people in Canada haven't read The Art of War, the Sun Tzu. The art of war for the Chinese is to take over a country without ever firing a shot. Mark Carney probably hasn't read the Sun Tzu, but for anybody that has read it, The Art of War, they're sitting back going, oh my God, look what China just did to Canada. They actually dumped tariffs on us with canola and the fishing industry down here. I'm broadcasting today from down in Nova Scotia, and virtually nothing was done about it. But they created a giant lever to use against Carney to get electric vehicles into Canada and get involved in our security apparatus. Israel earlier this week said that the EVs that are going to be brought into Canada, the same EVs that they're using in Israel, they've just confirmed that they're sending nonstop data back to China about everything they're seeing and experiencing in Israel. What do you think is going to happen in Canada? I mean, I, for one, am never driving in an EV built by China.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking to see, man. And I'm kind of a similar mind to you. I don't think Trump can allow this. I think there's the Monroe Doctrine, which he has at his disposal. Yeah. And I think once we see Greenland dealt with, I think he'll start pressuring Canada in some way. It's not only this, like Sam Cooper blew a lot of this up with his reporting. All of the drug ties to the Chinese triad gangs and all of the precursors and fentanyl, all of the crime. We're essentially like we're on an Interpol list for being a international criminal hub. And I mean, then we're just bringing it closer to the Chinese Communist Party. And it's just, I agree with you too. I mean, especially with the Commonwealth countries, when you look at it, the way it works, the Crown Corporation, Privy Councils, we're essentially, we have actors, political actors, that their job is like the public front of this. And that's Carney, Trudeau before him, Keir Starmer, Albanese in Australia. Like they're just the public face of this, and the decisions are made far above it. And it's when people are skeptical of this, I always say the best way to bolster the argument is, what are the odds that all of these things are happening in our independent nations? Like, what are the odds we've seen the exact same strategy? Weaponized mass migration, Cloward Piven strategy. We've seen the division, all of the ways to play us all off against each other. Everything's hyped up in the media. Like we're watching an agenda being implemented.
I have to agree 100%. Mark Carney's wife is reportedly the niece of Francis Fox Piven.
I've heard this. Yeah. I never vetted it, but I did hear that.
You can't get more tangled up when you come to this stuff. So what's happening is this is a very complex web. And for Carney to come out, and if you watched his facial expressions, I did law enforcement for a lot of years, and that's what I watch on people. When he put his head slightly down and said New World Order, well, I thought Scott Moe was going to pass out at the table.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is, if Canadians or anybody who sees this wants to really understand the New World Order, only recently did I get a chance to actually listen to a copy of the Audible book, Behold a Pale Horse, written by William Cooper. And William Cooper, back in the 90s, was listed by Bill Clinton as the most dangerous man in America. He was a former naval intelligence officer who became a whistleblower. And he wrote that book, Behold a Pale Horse. And the whole book is about the New World Order, how it's created, what the plans are. And ultimately, he was in his driveway after that came out, and he ended up in a shootout with police, and they shot him in his own driveway. They had to shut him up. They couldn't stop him. But, I mean, if anybody really wants to understand the New World Order, then get a copy of that book. It's called Behold a Pale Horse. It's only 3 or 4 hours on Audible. Now, don't get me wrong, at the tail end of it, he gets into a lot of stuff there that top secret stuff he had access to. You're talking, interplanetary stuff, UFO, military crash sites, all types of things. But he does comment that that part might not be true. But everything in regards to the New World Order and the long-term plans, the people behind the scenes, the groups, that's so spectacularly accurate that it's like a window into the future. He wrote that book in the 90s. And when you read that today, you'd think he wrote it last week.
There's a lot of these books out there. They're not widely known. They're becoming more prevalent now. I recently read Tragedy and Hope 101. Now, this was by Joseph Plummer, and it's a summation of a book that was written in the 1960s called Tragedy and Hope by Carroll Quigley. And he lays out the Anglo-American Alliance, some of the power networks, the Fabian Society, Club of Rome, all of these connections of the real power networks above the government. And Quigley was granted access, special access. I believe he was from Oxford or Yale or one of the schools where they get a lot of their Rhodes Scholarship. And he takes it right back to Rhodes. And then he goes through Milner and all of the various NGOs, how they kind of control the governments and affect influence. It was a great book. And this is only probably about 3 or 4 hours as well. It's available free online. Tragedy and Hope 101, yeah. Joseph Plummer. But yeah, man, it's coming out. And I mean, in Canada, I think, like you mentioned, like Canadians don't know about certain things. We have the most oblivious electorate that one can fathom. Not only are they seemingly politically and economically illiterate, they've been misinformed. Like they still got their elbows up drooling on themselves, a large portion of them. And like, what should we do with these people now? Can we shake them or? Well,
one of the guys I had an opportunity to interview a couple of times, it was, I'm trying to think his name now, Jason, God, it'll come to me, but he's a mind control expert. And one of the things he talked about is the PSYOP that it's being pushed on Canada right now is so highly effective that most people don't realize how badly they're being manipulated. Jason Christoff is the guy's name. If you don't follow him, he's well worth a follow. And what he was saying is that every single tactic that has been perfected by the Tavistock Institute and the Fabians and the military, all of the tactics that are used to control millions of people have been used. They perfected a lot of it on COVID, and then Carney used it to get himself elected by turning Donald Trump into the boogeyman. Mm. And the people that are caught up in this, back in the day, JP, when I was younger, I'm getting up there quite a bit now, but back in the 70s, people would get caught up in cults. And they'd have to, you'd have to hire a PI to go down and rescue your loved one from a cult. And it would take them over 30 days of consistently telling them the truth and asking them questions that they had to confront things in their own head, just to unwind what they had been taught. And so what happens is we have a whole series of people that right now in Canada that were unwitting victims of the most orchestrated psyop in Canadian electoral history. And those are the same ones that are still thinking elbows up, a deal with communist China is a great deal. And unfortunately, the sad part is that you're not getting through them, and neither am I. They have to, much like Yuri Bezmenov said in a very famous interview that he did, he said they won't understand what's happening till they're being dragged into a camp somewhere with a boot on their neck. Even then, they might not be able to fully understand what just happened to them. And so that's why when I get a chance to do these interviews, I like to talk to as many people as possible. And I was getting so heavily, squashed by social media. That's why I actually wrote that book, The Redneck Conservative, because all of the things we're talking about, I talked about them in the book, and I gave at the tail end of the book at least 20 books that everybody should go read and do research on them. Another one is Aldous I can't get the names right.
Aldous Huxley.
Yeah, A Brave New World. And right now I'm reading Fahrenheit 451, where the goal is let's burn all the books. We can't have people having access to information. And then I look at what Carney's team behind the scenes are doing with all of the new legislation that he wants to put in place to restrict freedom of speech in Canada. And that has to happen for them to continue implementing the path that Carney's put Canada on. And the path is for total economic destruction.
And Huxley's interesting because I think it was his uncle, maybe Thomas Huxley, was involved in starting to conceptualize some of these methods. And I'm sure you're familiar with Edward Bernays, Sigmund Freud's nephew. And you mentioned the Yuri Bezmenov interview with Griffins. And we're like late stage demoralized now where there is no truth and people are just absolutely lost. But well, I got the mic here. I'm going to appeal to everyone. We got about 100 people watching live. I'm very much deboosted. So if you guys can share this stream, share it with anyone you think might enjoy this type of a conversation, it's very advantageous for us. But yeah, that's what I've been wording it, Peter. I've been telling people, and I'm saying it kind of in a hyperbole sense, but it's like my generation especially, I'm 42, we were born into a psyop. We were born into a psyop and conditioned with lies to accept depravity and to accept very fallacious framings for reality.
One of the other things that happened to you too, JP, because you're in that perfect age range. I'm 67. I got kids your age. So beginning in the 80s in Canada, every school, when I grew up, if a bully picked on you, you punched them in the face and you dealt with it. And sometimes you ended up becoming friends, but everybody fought back. Well, beginning in the 80s in Canada and the US and basically all across Europe, you know what the school system taught everybody? You can't fight back anymore. And if you're being bullied and you're being pushed around and you do fight back, you're going to get the same punishment that they got. So subconsciously, we've got a generation, your generation, that was brought up and it was beat into you subconsciously not to fight back. Because if you do fight back, you're going to get the same punishment as the people that you were fighting against. And because I watch a lot of people and I say, well, I wonder why they won't fight back. And then I go back, depending, I look at those ages. Anybody from age 43 back and younger, they've all been taught not to fight back.
I was raised in Cape Breton. I was raised in the Pier. I'm sure you're familiar with
the
Pier. Yes, sir. So I had my share of fights.
For me, buddy. Port Hawkesbury.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Now I was born in Toronto, but don't hold that against me. I was raised in Cape Breton. I was in Cape Breton, my mother's family being from there. But you're absolutely right, sir. It's now it's even worse. We have this anti-bullying stuff. They got the young men wearing pink shirts to show that they're against bullying. It's like, listen, the bullies don't go away. One of the most important lessons you learn in school is how to deal with them. And I mean, if you're taking that lesson from children, then you're infantilizing them. You're making them incapable of actually dealing with some of the adversity that they're inevitably going to encounter. Life is wrought with adversity. So, I mean, I agree with you 100%. And what we're seeing is weaker kids. I'm 42. I see kids in their 20s now, not all of them, but they wouldn't have survived even in my generation. They would have got ridiculed. They're very effeminate. The way they even carry themselves, they slouch. They're afraid to look you in the eye. Like it's just wild how bad they are. And it's like, we need young men. We need men. We need masculine men. And another thing this has done is we've gotten so far away from masculinity that there's these hyper exaggerated versions of it. You get like your Andrew Tates, who's like, that's kind of a negative influence in my estimation. But kids are attracted to it. Why? Because they've been deprived of masculinity. They don't understand what it means to be a man anymore.
I got a whole chapter on it in my book on how to deal with bullies, because a bully in high school, if he didn't get his lights punched out, right, he'll go on to become a bully in the business world or wherever he ends up in government. It doesn't matter where he ends up, and he will be like ink in a well and destroy everything that he touches. And people who grew up from your generation and younger, they don't know how to deal with it because they weren't taught to fight back. And the bottom line is you and I are both sitting here today because somehow you made it through and learned to fight back. And so what happens is over my entire career, like I was lucky to have a real wild Celtic mom from down in Cape Breton who taught me to fight back. And she also taught me to question everything. Dad was military, and he was bad for taking orders and not questioning. And then when I started carrying a gun for the government as a game warden, him and I used to get into a lot of conversations. And Dad would always say to me, well, I don't believe the government would lie to me about an issue that big. He was brainwashed as military to believe, no, everything that you're being told is for the greater good. And then finally, before he passed away, he was finally at the point that him and I could talk about these things. And I'd say, well, Dad, see what the news just said? I was there today. He said, I can't give you the details, but it's 180-degree opposite as to what just happened. Over my entire career, JP, inside the Lancet Force, which is probably what it was called back when you were down there, we lied to the public every day on every issue. And 90% of the lies were just by omission. We never told you anything that would make the government look bad. Because if you knew what was really going on, you might find yourself at a politician's door back at the day, maybe at Billy Joe's with a pitchfork and a torch, right? And so what ended up happening is we just ended up with a bunch of people not taught to fight back. And I don't know how to get through. I spend all my time with my grandchildren, teaching them to fight back and to question everything. And so Dad and I finally got to the point where he went, you know what? He spent a year on the Gaza Strip in 1963. And when he came home, he said to me, there will never be peace in the Middle East, ever. He said, it can't happen because people are taught from the time they walk to hate one another. And he said, so, when he started looking at some of the military decisions and things that are happening, I watched Mark Carney the other day saying he was considering sending some of our military to Greenland. Now, this is the same simpleton who said he'd like to take 30,000 federal employees with purple hair and nose rings and whatever else, God knows, and teach them how to use firearms, and they're going to be our reserve military. And he wanted to do that so he could tell NATO that he was meeting, military requirements. Can you imagine taking the average federal employee in Canada and giving them a bit of firearms training and some other training in a 7-day period and then saying, now that you're our reserve? That's what Carney is actually looking at doing in Canada. People have to realize how outrageous some of the things that we're being told. And then I hear him say it and I go, well, that's an absolute lie. And then I hear it parroted on the radio same day. And then I watch it on ATV, CTV. And the only reason I watch any of that stuff now is to find out what lies are we being told today. Because like I said, inside DNR, we're professional liars, buddy. The province of Nova Scotia does not tell you the truth on issues, ever.
And I think that's right across the country. I firmly believe that there's no transparency in the system whatsoever.
None.
And that leads to there being no accountability. And that leads to a demoralizing effect on the electorate. You look at that last federal, the Trudeau administration, a plethora of scandals. I'd have a hard time naming all of them. And we never seen no accountability. They would kind of investigate themselves. They would release a report I remember the foreign interference that CSIS confirmed. They then did the Hoag's report. And don't worry, Canada, we checked it out ourselves, and you'll be relieved to know that there's no corruption. Everything's good. And it's kind of a joke. I think even Joe Average, that's in denial, is getting to the point now where it's just like, this isn't real. It's fake.
When Trudeau first got involved with the AgaCon, that's when I first actually stepped out. I was with a group of retired RCMP and police and a couple of lawyers. And after the AgaCon thing, where Justin Trudeau took like over $100,000 in trips for him and his family by a lobbyist, I said, guys, if you went into a restaurant and take free coffee, you can be suspended. And so I filed a formal complaint with Ottawa RCMP. And people don't know that Ottawa RCMP has what they call a sensitive issue division. So if it's going to involve politics, they run it through a filter that says how many type of problems is this going to file. So I filed. They actually opened a case, an investigation into Justin Trudeau on the AgaCon affair. It was 2018-535-124, I believe was the number on it. And 6 weeks later, Trudeau appointed Brenda Lucki to head up the RCMP, and the file got squashed. Just like that, done. Went away, and it was a Section 121 criminal code violation. You can't take bribes, right, or be seen to be doing anything untowards with money. And then after that, I filed again with the We Charity thing. Now, Bill Morneau stepped down over that investigation. RCMP Ottawa opened another investigation into the We Charity scandal. Bill Morneau stepped down, and then Brenda Lucki, still as the commissioner of the RCMP, made sure that file got squashed as well. And I got audited. And I still never got back my HST money that they owed me. Anyways, so what they were doing was they were saying, okay, if you're going to squawk, we're coming for you, and we're going to try to make an example of you. But I'm the wrong person to try to make an example of it. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book. I said, even if they eliminate me completely digitally, they can't take down copies of that book that are in circulation. And that was the whole idea. I'm not an author. I'm just a redneck guy who grew up in Port Hawkesbury, buddy, not far away from where you did, right? And I talk about it in my book, right back from getting out of university, my bootlegging days, to going into management in the pulp mill, and then going to natural resources, and then being stuck doing law enforcement, going, this is not where I intended to end up. But it turned out to be a heck of an adventure. And a bunch of the stuff that I learned there, I try to apply to everything I'm dealing with fighting corruption right now. I'll give you an example, JP. Inside our court case in Nova Scotia, the lawyer who was defending Elections Nova Scotia in our case, he was the one of the lead partners at Stewart McKelvey, one of the largest firms in Nova Scotia, probably making about $700,000 or $800,000 a year as a partner with the firm. That's an estimate. Well, the judge that was first appointed to look after our law case was a gentleman named Patrick Murray from down in Sydney, down where you were down there. And in the middle of the case, in the middle of August, he surprised everybody in court and announced that day he'd be taking an early retirement. Well, Sean Fraser, who's a good friend and neighbor of Tim Houston, the Premier of Nova Scotia, as the Attorney General, pulled Scott Campbell from Stewart McKelvey and appointed him to be a Supreme Court judge, replacing Patrick Murray, who was the lawyer here, or the Supreme Court justice hearing our case. Like, you can't make this stuff up, man.
They swapped the judge out on you.
They swapped the judge. And he would have took about a $500,000 a year pay cut going from Stewart McKelvey to go down and be a Supreme Court judge.
Wow.
And as of today's date, he hasn't recused himself from our case yet.
So is that something you feel that will occur,
Well, we hope that he does recuse himself. We're gonna put a request into the court to make sure that he is. But here's what I'm willing to tell you. Nova Scotia has a $17 billion budget annually. That $17 billion budget that's being run by the Premier, who won a supermajority by stifling the charter rights of 19 independents, right, is being threatened by this court case. Now, if your back was in a corner and you were looking at your career potentially ending, and all this chicanery being outed to the public, what steps would you be willing to take to try to shut down the court case? Now, I'm not saying that the court's going to do anything untoward. I'm just telling you that when the former person who was defending Elections Nova Scotia against the charter violations gets pulled from there and replaces the Supreme Court judge who was hearing the case initially, that's not a good thing. And that was Sean Fraser at the federal level dipping his toes into the judiciary in this very extremely important case down here in Nova Scotia. I mean, it's scandalous what's going on.
It is, man. And again, I don't think it's much different in any other province across the country. I talk to a lot of people, man, and it's similar things. Now, Nova Scotia, I think they're more apt to getting away with it. You look, this is where they chose Cape Breton for their gun buyback pilot. And when you look at what it was one of the representatives was related to Walsh, I believe it was, the police chief at the time.
Yeah.
And it's like, they're going to do this. And it was an epic failure, as it should be. I mean, that's atrocious that they're even endeavoring to do this. Like, let's just frame that for a moment here for people. Well, Canada's never had crime this bad. And we've never had more problems for the government to put a priority on and focus on. And they're actually wasting resources and time trying to confiscate the firearms from law-abiding, tax-paying citizens. That's where we are right now with this. It's atrocious on every level. And it's the corruption. And back east here in Nova Scotia, especially in Cape Breton, I find there's more nepotism in it's who you know. It's not necessarily, what you know. And they get away with it better. It's that old boys club type of politics is still prevalent here.
Big time. So people need to know there's going to be hundreds of millions spent on this campaign. They got 25 guns out of Cape Breton, and 12 of them were from one person who came and turned them in. So not even that. So basically, even that saying that we got 25 is, that's more obfuscation on what a massive cluster this entire firearms thing is. It's got nothing to do with it. Most people don't realize that what happened is why they won't back down on this piece of legislation is that there's an MP in Quebec, a woman who was a survivor of the Polytech Institute mass shooting back in the 90s. And her one condition is you either push this or I'm resigning, and you're going to lose the seat, and you're going to go to a by-election and probably lose the seat. They can't afford to lose the seat. Because they can't afford to lose the seat, they're willing to waste hundreds of millions of taxpayers' dollars to basically accomplish nothing other than make your average legal rabbit hunter a federal criminal after October. And by the way, some of the firearms that they're seizing are for hunting rabbits and squirrels.
Yep. Yeah, it's shocking, man. It's just the way. And again, I go back to this broader agenda that you're seeing, especially in the Commonwealth countries, but most of the EU countries as well. And it's definitely there's definitely some correlations there. It's bigger. It's like, again, several layers above the government, I believe, for sure.
Well, here's what our plan is down here in Nova Scotia. We're going to do everything we can with this case, and we'll be asking the government when we win to actually finance the Independent Nova Scotia Initiative to become a watchdog, that if they get out of line doing anything, that we'll take them in on a charter challenge. See, the problem is, JP, is the government gets away with minutia when it comes to charter violations because they're so cost intensive to run. When you decide you're going to do a charter challenge, you're going to have to pony up some serious money. Mm-hmm. And so right now on this case, although 19 people were kept off the ballot, there was only 8 people willing to become applicants in the case. Because a lot of people just said, there's going to be repercussions, and I've got a job. And down here, I can guarantee you, Tim Houston is vicious. If you do anything against him and he has a chance to squash you, he will. He leaves me alone, even though I've been out fishing with him and I have to apologize for getting him elected. But he was a true Manchurian candidate. He hoodwinked me and everybody that I knew that he was actually a conservative. He's more liberal than a liberal. Mm-hmm. And he was involved with something called the Paradise Papers down in the Caribbean, where his specialty was hiding money.
Yes, I heard of this.
And so there's 8 years down there. You can't find anything on Tim. And at the time, back in 2015, I had him and his son out fishing and stuff. We talked about a number of things. So Tim just leaves me alone as much as possible. But the reality of it is, by the time we're finished with him with this court case, I wouldn't be surprised if the party forces him to resign and they have to go back to elect a new leader. And the court may even say that the election itself wasn't legal and force the province back to a new election. It's that serious.
That's interesting, man. I'm praying for you guys because it's like you said, there's implications. It sets a precedence, and it can bring back. Well, it wouldn't even be bringing it back. It would be introducing an era of transparency in the Canadian government. And like you said, the ramifications could be bigger because it could apply to any Westminster parliamentary system.
And it wouldn't even have to be Westminster. You could apply this in the U.S., for example. In their system, if you want to run, why wouldn't any politician, why not even at a municipal level? You're going to run, the people in your area, we're going to get together, we're going to have town hall meetings, and we're going to put together a contract. And if you won't sign it, we'll make sure you don't get elected. And if you do, and you start doing crazy stuff like down in Halifax here, spending, they want to spend $100 million on bike lanes. Well,
yeah.
And you go and there's lots of money for speed bumps, but you tear the front end out of your vehicle in a pothole between the new speed bumps. Mm-hmm. And so people have their priorities all out of whack, but nobody's held accountable. And most people need to know in Canada, there was a case called the Little Child case in Alberta, that politicians legally can't be held liable for lying to you. The judge says you're only liable on election day. And so the only way to overcome that is through a contractual basis. And once again, credit goes back to Brian Peckford.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, man, what's going on in this country. And it's kind of more incomprehensible that so many people are oblivious to it. Now, you could say there's a lot of people that they're very busy. They're not politically minded. They don't have these interests. But right now you're watching the changes in your community. You're seeing the changes in your grocery bills. You're seeing the rent surge. You're seeing all of these things culminating, but most people are still afraid to look at it, to look beyond the veil and say, like, what's going on? It's like they just take one of the narratives that are given to them. I'm a firm believer with federal politics that Pierre Poilievre is some semblance of a controlled opposition. He's playing opposite Carney, but not in opposition to Carney. And I think that's the biggest hindrance for Canadians to actually finding an alternative route, because they look and all they see it's Pierre Poilievre, and he's got some feckless scripted rhetoric for you, and it kind of provides a pressure release for some of these Canadians.
I was the president of the Halifax West Electoral District Association, excuse me, for a number of years in Bedford, on the periphery of Halifax. Excuse me. And a couple of nefarious things that happened inside an election campaign. And I took it personally to Pierre Poilievre. And he just flat out refused to deal with it. He just wouldn't deal with it. Matter of fact, they did deal with it. They kicked me out for bringing it up.
And that's what you hear with this party. We had Derek Sloan on another podcast I do with Payman Ascari and Chris Erickson, and Derek was relaying what had occurred to him. Yeah. And I mean, and that's what it seems like. If you're a member of parliament and you dare to represent your constituency, if you deviate from the party orthodoxy and have the audacity to endeavor to represent your constituents, they throw the kitchen sink at you. So it's like the whole system. Anyone with integrity that gets in here, they get pushed out right away. And the swamp perpetuates itself.
So what happens is no party can allow any of its members sign a contract like that, JP. They can't, because they're all controlled by a party whip. Excuse me. So what ends up happening is you may be the best intentioned person to ever enter public life. The second you walk through the door on your first day, sit down, shut up, do what you're told. You'll do what the party tells you to do. You can tell your constituents anything you want, but you will do what the party tells you to do. If you don't, you're going out the door. You're going under the bus, straight up. And so because parties can't allow any of their members to sign a contract, a performance contract. Imagine in an election where there were all the charter violations and all the market barriers to having an independent run were lifted. And then you have to sit down as a party and in a debate say, let's say you've got a room with a couple of hundred people in it. And the independent says, well, I'm willing to sign an agreement with all of you. You guys tell me what we want, I'll do it. And the other party members, they got to sit there and they're not going to be allowed to do it under any circumstance. It's not going to happen. That's why every single trick in the book by the Attorney General and the legal firm representing elections in Nova Scotia, they're doing everything known to man to keep us from winning this case. Because once that legal precedent is set and those charter violations currently in every Elections Act, including the Canada Elections Act, get removed, then it opens the door for people to get involved. Or you can, as a community, go find someone you still trust and their handshake still means something and talk them into running for you and put in the contract that they can only stay in politics for 4 years. They're not there as a career. They're there to do a job, be a wrecking ball. And here's the thing is, the biggest carrot that gets held over the head of everybody in Canadian politics is your pension.
Yeah.
So you need to make it to a set date. I think here in Nova Scotia, it's 2 years, and then you qualify for a pension. So sit down, shut up, do what you're told, you'll make it to a pension, basic pension. Now, if you're a good boy or girl and do really good for the next 2 years, you'll get an increase in your pension. And if you get reelected, well, then you're good to go. And I believe in federal politics, they need 6 years, right? A full term and 2 more. So your first term, you're not rocking the boat, buddy. You got to remember, very few people in Canada go into politics that when they get that job will be making less money. And you got to look at someone like Carney and say, why would you take a pay cut of that extensive to go make what a prime minister makes compared to what you were making in the private sector? Mm-hmm. One of the very best people that you might want to try to get on here is a guy named Robin Hillier. Robin Hillier, much like Moose on the Loose, does some of the best research on how Mark Carney is profiting from his 103 conflicts of interest, especially with Brookfield Asset Management. I'll give you an example. The Chinese EVs that are coming to Canada, the batteries are supplied by a company that's managed by Brookfield Assets Management. All of the projects that Carney is putting in place right now that Brookfield is making money from, and that they're backstopped with federal money, pension money. Everybody involved in that gets their commissions day one when things get signed. It's not 20, 30 years down the road they get paid. They don't care whether anybody makes any money. Carney will make more money off the deals that went through Brookfield than people can conceive of. He may walk away after 4 years a billionaire, not 6 million that he declared in 103 conflicts of interest, potentially a billionaire. And if you can get Robin Hillier on, he's out of Calgary, he'd make a great interview.
Yeah, I'll look him up for sure. I will. I'll get his info off you after we're done. It's pretty crazy, man. I frequently say with Carney, it's like, listen, guys, this guy has referred to himself on tape as a European. He says, I consider myself more of a European. I've heard him personally refer to himself as a globalist. He's always looked down on politicians. He's always known he was in the class above the politicians. His book Values is a meticulous process of transitioning free market economies into what he calls human values-based economies, which is just a semantical rebranding of Marxism, of totalitarianism. Like that's what they have in mind. And they have the audacity to tell us directly. Like if I tell someone that, people will say, well, that's a conspiracy theory. It's like, no, son, that's his book. You just 100%. Read his book. You know what I mean? It's I'm not digging this out of some message board somewhere. I'm reading his own words, and it tells you right there. But what I tell people is like, don't think for a minute that this guy left his coffin in Europe and traveled to this resource labor colony, and that's what he thinks of it. He really does. Yeah. And he came here to help the people. Like, I know there's naive, but that's next level naive, and people really need to wake up at this point. There's some transformative things occurring geopolitically. You see it everywhere. The geopolitical power dynamics are realigning and reconfiguring. And we need to, as Canadians, realize which way the wind is blowing. Is it blowing to the EU? Doesn't seem so. It seems to be blowing to America, but fortuitously for us, we've always had a great relationship with America. It's this latest psyop where all these low resolution Canadians think they hate Americans. It's nuts to me. We're identical to Americans culturally. There's some differences, but I mean, if we're going to ally with anyone economically and militarily, it should be the country we're touching. You know, it's just silly, but they're trying to say that they can. Well, Carney's presenting that he can replace America with all these Asian markets. It's like, no, you can't. There's one big word that people aren't realizing, and it's why we do all of our trade with America. And the word is proximity. They're directly underneath us. That's right. We don't have to traverse oceans and set up new infrastructure.
Yeah.
And it's kind of silly, but this is the level of information our electorate has right now. It's like we're dumbed down, man. And it's really scary because I just see things getting worse and I see people getting more confused. They don't see the real battlefield.
One of the things people might want to consider, JP, and I don't think I've ever mentioned this anywhere before, that in Canada, we're all descended from people unwilling to fight against a king.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody south of the border said, we've had enough of that garbage. Right? You got to remember here in Canada, down in the US, they have the First Amendment, which is free speech. They have the Second Amendment to make sure nobody tampers with free speech. We have neither in Canada. Even in our charter, we don't have really rights. What we have is privileges that the government routinely will try to take them away from you. I'll give you an example. In our court case in October, Tim Houston went to Ontario, met with 4 other premiers to try to get legislation put in place so that Supreme Court judges can't rule on premiers violating sections of the charter. Basically said, we're the premiers, we're going to do what we want to do. And he did it in the middle of a Supreme Court case that's looking at him for charter violations. So here's what happens. They will do whatever they can get away with, and they'll look you in the face. And here's the other big thing, JP, is that when I was younger, or even when I was your age, they kind of covered it up as much as possible. Now it's straight in your face. They couldn't care less. We're going to tell you what we're going to do. And you know that we know they're lying. They know we know they're lying. Everybody knows it's all a big lie. And everybody just goes, yeah, but I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to be put on a list. Well, people need to realize you're already on a list. I don't know how many lists I'm on, right? You're on
that's an Alexander Solzhenitsyn quote.
Yeah.
That they know we're lying, we know they're lying, they know that we know we're lying, but they still lie. And we still accept
that's how the game is played. Everybody in Canada should go back and watch that full interview with Yuri Bezmenov.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I watched that interview that you did there with Jason James, and I even watch it happen to Jason. He goes, man, people get demoralized because of the lies. I can watch today on a news broadcast, and because of the training and stuff I have, I can pick out lies. Okay, lie. Probably 90% of what I see on any newscast is outright lies. Once upon a time, it would be by omission. Now it's just outright. It's just a lie.
And this is one of the biggest points to be made, because we're saying about all this corruption, this blatant corruption with Houston, for instance. Now, the reason he's getting away with that is because the media that used to be there to scrutinize these guys, that was their role, to scrutinize the public servants and ensure that the electorate was getting reliable information. That doesn't exist anymore. It's just narratives, right?
Yeah, it's completely gone. And I got to give credit where credit's due. Behind the scenes, another guy from down Cape Breton was used to be involved with the World Wildlife Federation, and he was working as Trudeau's top advisor. His name will pop into my head here in a bit. But one of the things that he specialized in was the art of the lie. And he recommended to Trudeau at the time that they bribe mainstream media with an extra $700 million. And at the time, that seemed like a really big deal. And during COVID, they had the same thing. It was that trusted media initiative. And so everybody in the media who finds themselves sideways in the trough has now sold their soul to try to stay in business. And the only people who aren't are folks like you and folks like, people running running online stuff, and they're doing everything they can right now to try to shut them down. I mean, you got to give the guys over at Rebel. I don't know how they manage to scrape and claw their way to get as big as they are right now, but I give those guys credit for what they're trying to do. But the fact of the matter remains, GP or JP, once you get big enough, then you're held hostage by your advertisers.
Yeah, you get audience capture too. A
Yeah.
lot of these people, I watch these influencers on X where I'm at,
Yeah.
and once they get big enough, they start getting invited to the conservative parties. Next thing you know, they're not scrutinizing anyone anymore. They're just giving you the same narratives, right? It's the system is set up in that way. But where you're saying they're keeping our voices down, like just for instance, we got 220 live viewers right now. I started this show probably about 6 months ago. And when I started, I was getting 700-800 live viewers. I get 2,000 views per episode. Now they just got me invisible on here. I don't know how they do it, but I know that it's different. It's not relative to the quality.
I'm also a Canadian ambassador with Freedom Train International, working with Jim Ferguson out of the UK. And prior to Christmas, around mid-December, we were doing live streams on Saturday night. We were getting 70,000 live stream views. The White House was getting 50,000. And all of a sudden, I haven't heard from Jim personally since mid-December. We were having meetings every week. I don't know where Jim Ferguson is right now, buddy.
That's crazy. I wouldn't know.
And I'm looking at some stuff that's getting put out, and I go, that's Jim's old stuff. Where the hell's Jim? Can't reach him. I'm trying to reach him on every platform. We're not hearing back from him. I'll know that I'm talking to Jim when I'm talking to him like I'm talking to you, and that hasn't happened since just prior to Christmas. Yeah. After we had that, I think 77,000 was one of the highest weekends we did. And he was getting a lot of traction in the UK, and all of a sudden, Jim. Oh, yeah, Jim. Has anyone seen Jim in the last month? Not me.
That's crazy. I don't know Jim personally, but we follow each other's accounts.
Yeah.
But that's pretty crazy, man. That makes me curious too. But it's we're coming to the end here, man. Before I let you go, I want to take a few questions. Is that all right with you?
Yeah, go right ahead. Love it.
Excellent. 1 second here. Give me a moment to get some through.
By the way, that book is pretty funny. One of the categories it was number one in is sports humor. Because I do a lot of hunting and fishing, and I was your typical redneck Cape Bretoner, buddy. You probably
I would have to expect a little humor in there from Cape Breton, right?
It's pretty wild. Some of the places in that book you'll recognize, the Rotary in Hastings and some of these other things and Hawkesbury and things we did.
I'm going to get a copy. I'm going to have you on to speak again. I really enjoyed talking with you today, so I'd like to get you on to speak with you again, and I'll read your book in the interim so I have more to talk about. But we got one from Andre Maloche here. So how can the principle of subsidiary be implemented whereby decisions are taken at the lowest level and closest to the citizens, local, regional, when they are completely politically illiterate?
Okay, so what he's trying to say is, and he has a good point, because most people are so busy trying to make a living that they don't have time to do any of the research that I have to do. I've been retired since 2012. Mm-hmm. I've got time to do research, and most people don't. So what happens is it's something called hive intelligence. And hive intelligence, if you get enough people commenting, common sense will tend to prevail. And I'm a member of another group called the Society of I forget what, thinkers of some kind down in the US, and they talk about hive theory all the time. And today, given the instantaneous response, I'll give you an example. You could be an independent, or you could be a party member, and you could be sitting in the legislature, and they're going to have a vote on something. And you could have all the constituents in your riding that are identified by a set marker inside. You're qualified to vote inside here. And you could just send out a thing and say, look, there's a vote coming up on this. How do you want me to vote on it? And anybody can follow it. And you could have maybe a 70 or 80% reply, bang, right away. Down here in Nova Scotia, for example, JP, in the last election, we had our lowest voter turnout in the province's history, 46%. Only 1 in 4 people voted for the premier that we have in power here right now. We had 10% fewer people show up to vote, knowing they weren't going to have an independent to vote for. Mm-hmm. Because we had done a lot of work from one end of the province. We were down in Sydney, we were down in Yarmouth, we were one end of the province to the other. And so what happens is a lot of those folks, you got to remember, okay, now in Nova Scotia, 6.5 out of 10 people didn't even turn out to vote. And what we're looking to do is capture the people that get interested. And what'll happen, and Yuri Bezmenov said the same thing, is once people are demoralized or what they hit rock bottom, then sometimes they'll start looking for a solution. And the solution is you have to get involved. There is no safe space left anymore. So the more people get involved and start trying to get information from reliable sources, the federal government knows that's the solution. And that's why they're working right now to shut as many people up who are not willing to follow a broken, lying narrative. So there is a solution. We just need to get people involved. And people get involved when they're pissed off and when they go and they look in their fridge and it's going back to school time and in the middle of August and they can't buy their kids supplies. Mm-hmm. And every week they're trying to go, man, how am I going to get enough money to be able to commute back and forth to work here? And the people on the news are telling me how great it all is. And I'm looking at my fridge and I'm looking at my status in life. And I'm looking at my 25-year-old kids in my basement who are never going to be able to afford a house. It's all lies.
Yep. And that's where it is, right? And it's like you say, they are seemingly right now, they're desperate to keep the truth out. They really are. I watch it every day on here. I talk to a lot of people and we all arrive at the same conclusion. What has to occur for Canadians to realize? And we all realize it has to get worse. And it's like once it gets worse, that necessitates them to actually, okay, what's going on? Like, this is getting crazy. And you keep thinking that's coming, but for some reason, they're very resilient. And just so many people refuse to look at this thing right now.
Well, I think it was Schopenhauer who said, never underestimate stupid people. And what ends up happening is a lot of people know a little about a lot, but a lot of people don't have the time to learn a lot about a little, and they need to start learning about the important things. And from the time I was a kid, I drove them crazy in school as a result of this. Mom and Dad said you need to question them. If it doesn't make sense to you, ask questions. And the more that you start asking questions, this doesn't make sense. And then you look around and everybody else, nobody wants to say that doesn't make sense, but it only needs one person in a room of 50 to stand up and say, well, this doesn't make sense. And then you look at everyone looking at one another. Yeah, I was thinking that, but I didn't want to say it. Mm-hmm. So we need more people to dig a little bit deeper, find some courage, and realize that, like in my case, I got 6 grandkids, buddy, looking at Grampy to make sure that this shit show gets reined in somehow. I'll go to my grave fighting this.
Yeah, I'm with you, brother. I sincerely am. We got some serious problems, and if we're going to get past it, we really have to wake people up right now. And hopefully we can do that. Hopefully we did it a little bit today with this episode. So we have 250 live viewers. I'm going to tell you guys, we get the majority of our views on this after the live broadcast. So I will appeal one more time. If you guys can share this with anyone you think might enjoy it, like it, interact with it. Make sure you get over and follow Peter McIsaac. And we'll get him on in the future. We'll get him on again soon to have another conversation. With that said, Peter, before we go, do you want to tell everyone where to find you?
Yeah, the easiest place to find me, guys, is on X and it's there on the screen, at Peter R. McIsaac. And I'd really appreciate a follow and a share. And if you get a chance on Amazon, that's on Audible too. You can pick up a copy of that book. And that way, when I get censored completely or hauled off to a camp, you can at least sit around a fire someday and look back. I remember when we were still free. And that'll be one of those books. They'll say, oh, man, you're caught with a copy of that book. They're going to hang you later on next week. Hide that.
That's right. We hope we don't get there, but you never know. This trajectory, it sure seems like it. Thanks a lot,
JP. Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming out and talking to me, man. I really enjoyed the conversation. Stick around. We'll talk after we sign off here. I want to thank everyone for watching and interacting. My name's JP Berg. This is Dumb the Wiser. Cheers, guys.